Now that we've gone over how to set up a single light and the lab has kind of shown how to set up two lights, what I'd like to do is set up a light that does a little bit of a different behavior. Right now, I have a light switch that turns off and I can't turn it on again, which is fine. This is perfect for the example. I'm going to kind of keep it as simple as possible. As I said before, there's a state machine here that says, hey, there's a button, and when you click on it, turn off the light. There's nothing that says we can't have other things that control whether the light turns off or on. So if you think about it, Playmaker gives me an option to click this button to turn the light off, right? But there's lots of different ways that you can control something like a stoplight. Like we said in the stoplight example, the different ways that it could turn from red, yellow to green is that either the time can run out, or someone could be near the sensor, or someone could push the crosswalk button. So what we can do is right now, this button that we have in Unity is basically the same as someone hitting the button to activate the crosswalk. I hit the button and the light turns off, right? You can imagine that's me as a pedestrian hitting it. But why don't we set up something instead that says, hey, after, let's say, 5 seconds, go ahead and turn off the light anyway. I don't need to wait for someone to click the button. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to delete this button that I had added before. So I have nothing in here. And instead, I'm going to go back to my action browser. I'm just going to add a wait action. And wait actions are super common. You're going to use them a lot. Ranging from things like, hey, I just used an ability in my RPG and I want to have a cooldown before I can use it again. Or I have an enemy spawner and I want enemies to spawn like once every 5 seconds, right? Wait is kind of like the all-purpose time controller. So wait has really few properties. It has basically how long do you want to wait in seconds, and then what do you want to do when it's done waiting. In this case, I want to wait for 5 seconds, and then when it's done, I want to turn off. Okay, and that's it. And if I press play, I'm going to watch Playmaker here. Watch this state. It's going to wait for 5 seconds and then automatically turn off, like that. Okay. Do that again. So light is here in the on state. I'm not clicking any buttons or anything. It's literally just the wait state that goes off. So I can speed this up a little bit. I can make this something like 1 second. So when I press play, 1 second after it starts, it turns off. And what I can do is I can add a second wait state. I'm sorry, not a wait state. I can add a second wait action. What if I want to turn on again after some period of time? All I have to do is go here, add another wait, and this wait, I'm going to have light turn on again. And one little bit that's not in here that I need to do yet is when the state goes on again. You guys have all done this. I need to set the light intensity back to 1. Okay? So here, as a recap, I basically have 2 things that each state is doing. One, the light's turning on, like this. And then I'm going to wait for 1 second and then fire this turn off event. And in the other state, I'm going to turn the light off, wait 1 second, and then turn it on again. What this will mean is that the light will automatically turn off and on at a rate of 1 second. So every second, the light will blink, right? This is basically a blinking light. Okay? And there's nothing that says I can't make this thing super fast, like 0.2 seconds. Right? Or there's nothing that says I had to have them both be the same time. Maybe I want it to be on for 1 second and off for 0.2. Right? Maybe I want it to be on green longer and then flash. That's how the wait state, the wait action works. It lets you control time. Now, I kind of want to do the stoplight together with you guys so that we can go over it. This is lab number 4. So I have a light that turns on and off again. What if instead of turning it on and off again, let's just change the color of the light, right? So I'm going to delete these set light intensity actions in both of my states. And I'm just going to add a set light color action instead. And I'm going to rename this state from on to red, because I'm going to turn this thing red. And I'm going to rename this thing from red to green, because I'm going to turn this light green. I'm not doing anything different other than renaming, and I'm changing the light color instead of actually turning the light on and off. Same exact wait states and everything. The only difference is that the light now turns green briefly, which is about how long the Irvine stoplights work, I'm pretty sure. Red, green. There's no yellow in here. Right?
No, you get to see it. It's just there's no time to react.
Oh, there is a yellow light. This is basically what the state machine for stoplights in Southern California work like.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to do a couple more things. One, I need to rename these events, because if you look at the events, these events are for a light switch. This says turn off and turn on. Really, it's not turn off and turn on. It's turn green and turn red. Okay? All the other functionality stays the same. Okay, so how about this? Let's insert yellow, right? Let's add a new state called yellow. And let's add a new event that says turn yellow. So where does yellow fit in this state machine? Crystal. Here? Here? When does a stoplight turn yellow? Before? Who said what? Tell me where it goes. In the middle? Okay. What does state machine look like? How does it go? Red to what? Red to green, okay. And then, this says turn red. I'm actually going to delete this thing. I want it to turn yellow, like that. And then I want yellow to turn green. No, I want it to turn red. That would be a really terrible stoplight. Okay, so that's our state machine, right? That's basically what we drew up on the whiteboard. The key is that now we have to change this wait state. Green is going to turn yellow. And here's a trick. You can copy these states. I can just click on both of these, like this. I can shift-click both of these, hit Control-C to copy, or I can go here and copy. Click on yellow, and then paste. Change this to green. This thing is going to turn the light yellow. And there we go. Oops. And one more thing. This needs to be turned red. And our stoplight is now fully functional.
Hey, Damien.
What?
I out-Damien'd you.
There's no such thing as that.
I did, though. Not only did I make it more annoying than you make it, but it works. And it's not broken.
Well, then you didn't out-Damien me.
All right. Any questions on the stoplight for everyone? Anyone have any questions at all?
How did you copy the?
Oh, so the easiest way I found is to first minimize these guys so that they're not there, and then I hold down Shift and I click both of them, and then you can just copy with the right-click menu,
Oh, okay, cool.
and then you can paste it into the state. Cool. Okay, so that's lab number 4. All right, stoplight. This is the state machine that describes it: red, yellow, and green. And if you're not sure how these work, go ahead and review the video. And it should be pretty straightforward for you guys to be able to see how this works. Okay. Let's do the next bit. So, triggers. Some of you guys have already made triggers. Who already finished the trigger part here? Okay. You're doing it right now? Okay. Triggers are they're so super common. Like, we use them for everything. Triggers give you so much functionality. They range from things like, hey, I hit a button and it's a trap door that opens, right? Or it can be, there's a power up on the ground, and when I touch the power up goes away. Or a bullet is firing through the air, something hits its trigger and takes damage and dies, right? Or an enemy is walking across, you hit the enemy and you'll take damage or you'll die. Or you swing a weapon, right? A melee weapon, the trigger hits something on the weapon, that thing takes damage. Right? Triggers are used everywhere. the first way we're going to use triggers for this week is we're going to place a trigger in the level. We're going to have a trigger in the level that does something when you run into it. Okay. So I have a lab right up that's going to explain what I'm about to do here, so you guys can follow along if you haven't already. I'm going to have everyone do lab number 5 if they haven't already. But I'm going to first show it up here. I'm going to do the whole thing, and I'm going to have you guys basically follow along. Okay, and I'm going to share with you some of the tips that I use as well. So here's my light. Poor light, I don't need it anymore. I also don't need the cube anymore, so it goes away. I'm going to import the characters package because I need a first-person controller. And at the same time, I'm also going to add a plane to the level so I have something to walk on. I imported the character package. Right-click on your assets folder in the project view and then import package and do character. Yeah, you can follow. I have this all in the lab too, so if you kind of fall behind, that's fine. I'm also going to add a plane to the level. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and fix my lighting because I kind of like broke my lighting here when I did this. Bring up the ambient intensity. Oh my god, so bright. And just for the sake of it, I'm also going to add a cube. Just because I need something to kind of ground myself in. Okay, and finally, I'm also going to import a package called the prototyping package. This only exists in Unity 5. So if you don't have Unity 5 running, you can go ahead and use, I'll put something up in Zool right now, which is the Playmaker assets. There are 2 packages you can drag into Playmaker, one audio, one objects. And these, only if you're not using Unity 5, you can use them instead. I'm only importing prototyping because it has a lot of nice, like we call them, it's equivalent to something called an Uber kit. We use Uber kit on Overwatch for all of our levels. Like we block out all of our levels ahead of time. We basically create the design space. The level designer goes in and basically puts down raw geo first, and then the environmenters come in on top later and kind of art up the environment. But we use the Uber kit to define the collision spaces, as well as kind of like lines of sight. We have snipers in the game, so it's really important that you don't have really long lines of sight. But prototyping is really useful. So now that I've imported prototyping, under standard assets, I have this prototyping folder, and in there I have a bunch of models I can use. All these models, which are nice and flexible for whatever I want. I can put ramps down. Yeah, they actually have color on them. I can put a ramp down. I can put like a big platform down. I can put pillars. Not that you couldn't make this kind of stuff by yourself, but yeah, it's all like kind of just simple, and you can put down walls as well. Like it has a wall that doesn't have any back faces, so it's optimized. Like that. And again, you can use vertex snapping here. Snap the vertex of that. Hold down V while you're dragging it. And vertex snapping is nice in that you can rotate a wall and on the grid. And yeah, you can just move things as well. Okay. So there's our level. And also I'm going to put the first person controller in there. And if you can also use a third person controller if you want. I'm going to go to Prefabs and just drag an FPS guy in there. It's my level. And I want to set up a trigger so that when I jump on this platform over here, it looks like these platforms don't have any collision. Oh, right. So, that's something to keep in mind too. Prototyping has a prefabs folder. I should have been using these instead of the models, because the models by themselves don't have collision on them. So you would have to actually go ahead and add a mesh collider on each of these. Okay, let's try this again.
Should have been using the prefabs?
Yeah, the prefabs already have the mesh collider built in. If you didn't put them and you put models instead, you could just add a mesh collider component. It's really easy. Just click on the thing and just go under physics and add a mesh collider here. Really, you should be using the prefabs anyway, because these kind of have everything that you need. Like this one has a box collider on it already. That's not the point of this lecture, though. It's more about like, let's figure out a play space that actually has something. So I want to actually add a trigger onto this thing. So triggers are just cubes, really, for the most part. You can really have a trigger be any shape you want, but for the most part, we're going to be using cubes. And really, you can use anything to be a trigger. For instance, here, I'm going to put down a block prototype, a cube prototype here, like this prototyping block. And I'm going to use this as my trigger. So the interesting thing about triggers is that you really don't want them to be visible to the player. For the most part, most triggers are intended to be invisible. And in this case here, I have this block. And in order to make it invisible, I'm actually just going to turn off the mesh renderer. Notice that the cube is still there. It's just now there's a wireframe there representing it. And if I play right now, there's another bit about triggers which is important, is that they're not supposed to block the player. So if I'm going to go ahead and jump on this thing, notice I can't jump on it because the trigger is blocking my progress. I don't really want that. So what you do is you turn the is trigger checkbox true. It doesn't change how it looks. All it does is that now it won't block the player. It still cares about collision, but now I can step on it. And now that I can step on it, the trigger actually is aware of people that enter and exit triggers. So a trigger is really nice. You can put any number of them as you want in your level. So I can put multiple triggers in there. I would say if you have a trigger in the level, you should name it something that says trigger, because now which one of these objects is a trigger? It's a cube prototype 020202. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename it trigger underscore cube. So now I can find it here, because you can't select it like this. Notice there's no way to select it. There is a way, I think if you go on the wireframe, there's a shaded wireframe. There's supposed to be a view here. There might be a view to be able to see the trigger itself. But like honestly, like this is pretty much the main way to select it, is through the hierarchy for the trigger. Okay. So we can add a state machine to this trigger. Now, if you think about trigger, think about like an automated door, right? Like you walk the door that slides automatically. This is basically what we're going to be kind of making. We can tell when the player has entered our area. So what states are in an automated door? Like a door that has a sensor on it. What are the two states that a automated door has? Open and close, right? So what causes it to go from closed to open?
Something triggers the sensor.
Right, so something walks into the sensor, right?
Yeah.
So we're basically going to be doing that. We're making one of these doors, right? And so the trigger is going to have two states to it. One is waiting for someone to walk in, and the other one is do something once he's walked in. Right? That's essentially what an automated door is. Really, the door has two states, like open and close, right? But the sensor also has two states, right? Waiting for a player or waiting for someone to walk in, or someone has walked in. All right, so let's make a state machine for this thing. I'm going to add another Playmaker FSM to this guy, to the trigger now. And notice whenever you add an FSM component, it adds a little icon here, just to tell you what things in your game have FSMs. You'll also be able to tell that it has an FSM because when you play and you look at it, see that little state label there? It says state 1. They show up in your game. If you want to turn them off, you can. You can go here, you can go to edit in the Playmaker editor. On the bottom right here, there's a button that says preferences. Click on that. And there's a little checkbox here that says show state labels in game view. And if you turn that off, when you play your game, you won't see the state labels on things that have a state machine on them. So it's hidden now. It's important because sometimes you're making like a maze or something, or you're making an obstacle course, and these labels draw through the entire world. So you can see them through everything. So sometimes it's important to hide them. Okay, questions so far? Triggers. Okay, so I'm editing this thing. I'm going to add two states to it, kind of like an automated door. One is waiting for someone. That's the name of the first state. The second state I'm going to make is someone is inside. That's it. Those are my two states that I'm making for my trigger. Okay. How do I get from one state to another? Well, again, we need to have an event that describes how I go from one state to another. Events are the things that let me draw the wires that connect one state to another. So what is an example? What is the name of the thing that can happen to trigger? What is the thing that causes me to go from closed to open for a door? What causes an automated door to open for you?
Something triggers the sensor.
Something triggers the sensor. How about someone?
Player triggers sensor.
Someone walks in or something, right? We can do that. Someone triggers. Someone triggered. Someone triggered me. Hit my trigger. So that's the name of something that can happen to cause me to go from one state to another, right? This is how I kind of want you guys to think about it. I kind of want you to think of this events view is how you define the wires that go from one state to another, right? And the wires are really like, it's like a sentence describing how do you go from one thing to another. Well, in this case, someone triggered me, okay? So I can right click and I can add a transition that says someone triggered me. I can go here. All right, so now I have my state machine set up, but again, nothing is actually telling me to do this event. I know that if this event happened, that I'd like to go to this state. But I want it so that this thing actually causes the trigger to fire. Right now, if I play, again, I'm in this state waiting for someone, and I'm going to walk inside the trigger, and nothing happens, right? Because we never told Playmaker that we care about the trigger. This is all Playmaker knows about. There's no actions here. You cannot have a state transition from one to another without some kind of action. There's no way. Because these two are empty, it's like, well, I don't know, you didn't tell me to do anything. It's as if someone installed the sensor to an automated door but didn't plug it in, right?
It's got the sensor.
It has a sensor, it's there, and there it is, there's a trigger that we had set up, but you forgot to actually plug it in. Well, that's essentially what's here. So it's really easy. All we have to do is we're going to add an action, and there's one action called a trigger event. And so I type trigger in here. I'm just going to add this guy into our action browser. And the trigger is set to have a couple of options, whether you want this thing to happen when someone enters it, or if someone stays inside of it, or if someone leaves it. In this case, I want it to happen when someone enters the trigger. And the send event, this is what I want it to do when someone walks inside of it. This is a really common thing. Everyone's going to do it. If I just press play, I have the trigger event in there, but I didn't pick an event in the drop-down box, it's not going to do anything. Because it knows I entered, but because that drop-down box here is empty, and this is like the one drop-down box that everyone screws up, you just have to pick the event here. If you're ever wondering why your trigger doesn't work, 99% of the time it's this. The other 1% of the time is going to be because you set up your trigger here on the cube. I'm going to move this out of the way, and you didn't check this checkbox. Okay? You'll know because if you didn't check the checkbox, you'll run into an invisible wall. All right? Okay, so now I have everything set up. I have my trigger event. Here's my send event here that says someone triggered me. And let's watch the state machine on the right side of the screen. And now when I walk up into it, I changed. Cool. That means we can do things now in here. There's nothing that it does right now, but I can have it do something like play a sound. So I have a link to, I do Ludum Dares, which are like game jams, and part of Ludum Dares are you have to kind of make all your own sounds. And the thing is that it's really hard to find a way to make your own sound from scratch unless you have this website here. So this website is great. It lets you make a bunch of sounds by tweaking a bunch of sliders here and there. So here's some examples. Here's some, these are all like 8-bit kind of sounds. Oh my gosh, that's super loud. Every time you click this button, it makes a new, different sound randomly. These are power-ups. And you can change it's kind of long. Maybe I can just... You guys get it, right? Here's a bunch of jumps. Pickups. Shooting. This is like selecting menu options. Getting hit. Right? So you can kind of tune all these properties to kind of get a sound that looks or sounds like what you want. I'm just going to make it sound like a power-up. I'll pick one. That sounds good. Maybe this one. Explosion. Let's do that. And you can just export it to a wave onto your disk. I'm just going to save it to the desktop for now. Call it explosion. And I'm going to have Unity open here. I'm going to move this out of the way temporarily. And go to my assets, and I can make a folder for sounds. And what you can do is you can go to your desktop in a folder. There's my wave sound. Right? I can just drag it in here. And I can play it in here. I don't know why the volume is not working. I don't know why this thing, it should work. I don't know why it's not previewing it here. So we'll go back to the trigger now. Let's go back to the state. And in this action browser, we can just add a play sound. And you can pick the sound from here, or you can drag the sound from the project viewer. Like that. And another thing is, I'm actually going to move the player a little bit because I don't like having to walk there every time. Oh, and you know what? Unity, I swear it's playing the sound, but it's probably because this thing's not working. Let's open the volume mixer here. I don't actually know why. Load in background. It might be because my preferences.
Wait, when you played it?
Well, if you guys play it on your machine, I don't know, it's probably because I have like a microphone plugged in here. It might even just be because this thing is actually playing it on the wrong device. So that's how you basically play a sound. And instead of playing a sound, why don't we do something cooler? Now that, assuming that the thing actually played a sound, we can do something like, actually, yeah, why don't we move a platform out of the way? Why don't we move this thing up? And I'm just going to show you this a little bit ahead of time. You guys will go over this in more detail later. But actually just have an object in the world move whenever I touch it. So here's my platform here, which is platform prototype 0201. So I can drag this guy into an object. I can move it up, let's say 10, over the course of like 5 seconds. Okay. There goes off without me. So you can trigger moves like that too. It might be moving too fast for me, but yeah, you can do anything you want, and triggers are really powerful for that kind of thing. So what's nice is that what I'll show you guys next week, because I'm going to give you guys the lab now and then give you guys the homework, is that next week you can do things like this, where I take this platform and the trigger and I combine them together so that they're both together, and I'll just drag them into my assets folder here. This makes it a prefab, and I can drag it here, and now I have all these platforms that I can just drag, and each one of them will go up in the air when I touch them. So there are all my platforms over there. I'll just jump on one. There goes one platform. There goes another platform. Each of these platforms behaves the same way, no matter what. Let's say I want to go in and I want to change them so that they all move faster. You would think I'd have to go into each one of these things and change the speed. But actually, what you can do is you can edit the prefab and make those things move twice as fast in the prefab. And I'll go into more detail next week, but I kind of wanted to give you guys a sneak peek. Is I can go in here, and now all these platforms move twice as fast, just by me changing one value. Okay, cool. All right, so I want you guys to finish up by doing labs 5 and 6, and I have homework for you, of course. The labs are rather straightforward. They're basically what we just did, and there's also one more thing, which is restarting a level. So the homework for this week is I'd like for you guys to make an obstacle course in Unity. And the key difference here is that I really just want you to add one scripted thing, which is a trigger at the end of the level, which when you reach it, you basically restart the level. If you guys have time, go ahead and do a lot more stuff. But the obstacle course here, I want you to figure out a way to make a platformer that does something when you reach the end. Okay. I'm kind of leaving it a little open-ended. Like you guys are, I kind of encourage you guys to explore a little bit, learn a little bit about Unity, play around with some of the iTween stuff that I showed, play around with some of the other actions in Playmaker, try different things, try adding different triggers, try adding things that like kill the player even. Like you can restart the level at any point. Like maybe you make something that looks like spikes. You put a trigger there that when player enters it, you can restart it. I kind of want to see what you guys come up with next week. If you guys come up with just an obstacle course, that's cool too. But yeah, just one obstacle course, and there's a trigger at the end that restarts the level when you hit it. Okay. All right. So yeah, do labs 5 and 6, and then we're done.